Welcome to America with Lloyd Chapman and Bruce DeTorres. It is Friday, December 13th, 2024. How are you today, Lloyd?
Tremendous.
Good. We queued up censorship and Bobby posting on YouTube his interview of you, and then also a bill or a motion you told me about to further strip benefits or any help from small businesses. So, what do you want to tackle first?
Let's talk about that bill. It was at HR 10216, I think it is. Think of the absolute lunacy of trying to kill programs for small businesses. We've discussed this at nauseum probably, but 99.9% of all U.S. firms are small businesses. They
Hmm.
create about 98% of net new jobs, half the gross domestic product, half the private sector workforce, over 90% of U.S. exports. Trump's like, let's make America great again. It's impossible to make America great again without small businesses. That's where most Americans work. When you
Yeah.
when you see Trump rallies and all these people, make America great again, most of them either own or work in a small business, right?
Yep.
So uh, every Republican president in history has tried to end all federal small business programs. That's just a fact. Reagan tried to close it, Bush tried to close it. And when Trump was elected in his first term, the SBA budget was the lowest in history. When Trump took office, and was it 2016? The SBA budget was higher 40 years ago than when he took office. He cut it even further. Republicans are documentably, irrefutably anti-small business. They don't like federal small business programs.
Hmm.
And I found a bill a couple of weeks ago, HR 10216, that's going to end all programs for minority-owned small businesses. Well, minorities are 30% of the population. I think one of the reasons Trump got elected was he was able to bring minorities into the Republican fold, right?
Hmm.
He hadn't even taken office yet. And Republicans in Congress, I think Mike Lee sponsoring it in the Senate. I forgot the guy's name that's sponsoring it in the House. They're already drafting legislation to kill minority programs. Here's what I would say to Trump and the Republican Congress. What do you think is going to happen if the Republicans pass a bill to kill all federal programs to help and support minority-owned small businesses? They're going to leave the Republican tent and go back to the Democrats. And that's a huge segment of the population to piss off, right? And that's going to piss
Hmm.
them off, right? That's going to, everyone's going to know that. I would say, oh, thousands of companies will be forced to close their doors. Thousands, if not millions, of jobs will be lost. For what? What's the upside? It's just so insane. If the bill passes, it will allow up to actually over 92%, maybe as high as 95% of all federal contracts go to white people. That's not going to fly. It's 2024, right? That's not going to fly.
Do you
Why would
recall what is their rationale? Do you recall their supposed reasoning?
you know what? It's so crazy. They say it's to end racism. So a bill to give over 95% of all federal contracts to white people, they're calling it a bill to end racism. But that's a typical Republican ploy for like 30, 40 years to end programs to help minorities is to end racism, right? Which is just complete bullshit, right?
Yeah.
But how stupid. We're 36 trillion in debt. Congress has given away hundreds of billions of dollars. We don't have enough money to help hurricane victims. And they want to kill programs that create jobs.
Yeah, unfortunately,
Morons,
well,
idiots.
I think you're giving them a benefit of the doubt by saying it's stupid. I think it's nefarious. I think it's just greed, as you well know, and many people do nowadays. Congress works for the elite of the elite, the top 1% of the population, etc. I'm not quibbling with you, Lloyd. I just agree that it's got nothing to do with helping us in any way, shape, or form.
Well, there's something that motivates Republicans for almost 40 years now to try to kill small business programs. Here's the way I think of it. The Small Business Act mandates that a minimum of 23% of all federal contracts go to small businesses. And Fortune 500 firms, those greedy, crooked slime balls, they want every penny the government spends to go to their pocket. So
Yeah.
they got to get rid of this program that says 23 goes to small businesses. The only problem is if they were to do that, if they were to actually close the SBA and kill off federal small business programs, 99.9%, that means 1/10 of 1% are large businesses. And to kill federal programs for the 99.9% of all U.S. firms. So the top one-tenth of 1% can get more government contracts. That's insane. That's just
Yeah.
insane. That top one-tenth of 1% hasn't created even one net new job in over 40 years. And a report by the Government Accountability Office said 34% pay no taxes. So think about the future of our economy. If the Republicans are successful in killing small business programs and giving 100% of all federal contracts to one-tenth of 1% that don't create jobs and don't pay taxes,
Yep.
we're looking at a complete and total economic collapse.
This is why you created the American Small Business League. I think in 2004, people can and should see everything along these lines that you've posted there at asbl.com and comprehend the enormity of the importance of what you're describing, and then take any and all action that individuals possibly can, probably starting with lobbying your federal representatives. Hey,
Yeah,
what the heck? There's a law that says 23% of federal contracts should be coming to small businesses. And as you've taught me, only about 3% on average. So no president really since 1953 has executed the law as the chief executive is supposed to.
clearly not in modern history. When Reagan took office, he tried to close the SBA. Democrats wouldn't let him. So here's what he did. It's a typical trick. He changed the definition of a small business from 100 to 500. So 98% of all U.S. firms have 100 employees or less.
Hmm.
And Reagan and the average American company has 10 employees, and he changed it to 500.
Wow.
So that's kind of like in boxing, change the weight for the middleweight class to 300 pounds, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's not the middleweight class anymore if you can have a heavyweight guy. So what he did, I like
Right.
that analogy. What he did was change it where if you want to win the welterweight championship, you've got to fight, Mike Tyson,
Right.
right? That's
Right.
what he did. That was insane. Now it's 2,000, I think, and more. So in 2024, companies with up to 2,000 employees can get contracts as small businesses, and the average American business has 10 employees, and 87% have 20 or less. 87%
Yeah.
of all companies in America have 20 employees or less, and the government has adopted a small business size standard of up to 2,000 employees.
Right. Right.
Anti-small business,
Yeah.
anti-jobs,
Yeah.
unbelievable. And by the way, I'm ranting. And then they passed legislation that allows 34% of the largest, most profitable companies in America to pay no income tax. Then they give away hundreds of billions to foreign countries. Think about that. To me,
Yeah.
it's just like I can't believe it's not on every TV station every day. Big businesses don't pay taxes.
Right.
They've given away hundreds of billions, and they're trying to kill the programs for the small business where most Americans work that
Yeah.
create 98% of net new jobs. It's like
Yeah.
they're trying to destroy the economy, right?
Well, that's my impression, and I'm going to put up on the screen that bill and the number that you mentioned, so folks can search it and understand for themselves what is looming. Yet another shrinkage of benefits to small businesses.
Crazy.
Yeah. Do you want to swing into either of those other topics we wanted to talk
Well,
about? So,
um, I have friends that have friends that work at X, and I'm hearing the same thing from everybody. I've also had people on X reach out to me that work at SpaceX, and one guy said they're trying to get rid of the programming in the algorithm that suppresses certain people and certain topics. So what I've come to gather is that X has a shadow ban on small business. So if you mention small business, that post will be suppressed, shadow banned, deboosted, ghost banned. Now, who did that? It's the frickin' government, right? I would have to say it's probably directed at me. I was walking my dog in Canada like a year ago, and a thing popped up on my phone. It was an article that said that X had acknowledged that they found code in the algorithm that suppressed certain people and certain topics, but I could never find out, what those were, right? So my impression is it must doesn't control X. I don't think when he bought it, he realized that it's this massive, software program apparently. And from what I gather, outside entities have some control over it. In fact, quite frankly, my personal opinion is they have complete control over it.
hmm.
I've got 18,500 followers, and generally on X, your views will be about 3 to 5 times the number of followers you have. So any post I put out, I should get, 40, 50,000, and I've had up to 1.8 million views. But about the time I started talking about Trump closing the SBA, my engagement has dropped 99.9% from the high. Think about that. That's impossible, right? So clearly I'm being shadow banned and suppressed on X. And by the way, if you go on your computer and type in shadow ban on X, you'll see a multitude of stories. So clearly people on X
Hmm.
are being shadow banned. I
Hmm.
think the woman that runs X says we don't shadow ban people, but there's 100 stories like how to tell if you're shadow banned. X users are complaining about shadow banning. So it's just kind of rampant. It's like people complaining about snow, in the wintertime in Wisconsin, right? So yeah, I'm puzzled why Musk doesn't have control of X and why he's not able to deliver the free speech that he promised us when he bought it. I
Hmm.
saw him do an interview and he said he bought X to give the American people free speech. Well, we don't. And I'm a prime example. If you're on X, go to X and follow me and look at my post. I have contests now. So I've
Hmm.
given away $3,000 in prizes just this week. And I'm trying to show that I'm shadow banned. I had a contest where I said, the first person that can show me anyone that has the number of views that I have or more, that has less views on their post, I'll give you $1,000. Right?
Hmm.
And people have struggled to find like one post of the millions and millions of people. They found one post that had fewer views than some of my posts. This week, I put out two open letters, national press releases on Business Wire, the largest news wire service in the world. They claim when you put out a press release, it goes out to hundreds of thousands of media outlets. I put one out Tuesday. It was an open letter to the new SBA administrator, and then I put one out yesterday to Elon Musk. Neither one of them were picked up. So if you go to an open letter from Lloyd Chapman to Kerry, I think it's Loeffler, and then an open letter from Lloyd Chapman to Elon Musk, there should be 50 pages to pick up. There's not one. So those two press releases were also suppressed.
Well, that
And we're
continues
talking,
many years of you personally being censored, blocked,
yeah,
banned.
that's gone on for, oh my God, 20 years.
What do you know? Have you had a chance to study the background of this nominee to run the SBA?
She's a classic, stereotypical SB administrator. She has no background or experience or interest in being a small business advocate. They've never had anybody to head the SB that had any background. It'd be like appointing a plumber to head NASA, right? Or someone from the Forest Service, to head, the SpaceX, right? I'm
Hmm.
sure she's a nice person, but typically the head of the SBA is an honorary position for a very wealthy person, a multimillionaire that's donated lots of money to the president's campaign. It's kind of like an ambassadorship, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then the bureaucrats that have been there for, 20, 30 years, they're the ones that run it. That's why nothing changes. I would
Yeah.
imagine when this woman comes in, there's going to be a briefing and they're going to just lie their ass off to her and tell her all this bullshit, right?
Yeah, about
And
how great the SBA is, how it helps, it's
oh
doing
yeah, we're doing a
exactly what
great
it's supposed to
job.
do, and
Yeah.
yeah.
The truth is that pretty much everything the SBA puts out is a lie. Anything the SBA says is pretty much not true.
You have substantiated that in the past, right? That's not just
I've,
your, yeah.
I've sued the SBA countless times. The one that stands out in my mind. So the SBA comes out and says, "Oh, last year we gave small businesses 30% of all federal contracts. We gave women this much, and minorities, and service-disabled veterans." And you go, "Great, can I see who you gave it to?" They go, "No." And unless you've got $1 million in 5 years in court, you're not going to see it. Why wouldn't they give it to you? Why it's not on the internet? If the SBA is doing what they say they're doing, why don't you brag about it? Put a list of the companies that you gave contracts to. I remember about 10 years ago, the SBA came out and said it's a victory for America. We gave small business all this money. I said, great, let me see who you gave the contracts to. They said no. So I sued them, and they told the federal judge that they had no information on who got federal small business contracts.
And the
And
judge
the
ruled how?
judge, well, I won. I always
Yeah.
win. Judge Marilyn Patel said this: "It's curious the SBA claims to not have the very information they would need to carry out their mission." So the judge called them a liar. So the Small Business Administration is lying to the American people, to the public, to Congress, right? And
When they lose a case like that, what's the punishment?
they have to pay my legal fees.
Okay. Do they
Yeah.
pay
In
any
fact,
fine? Are they held in any kind of contempt
no,
or?
nothing happens. There's
All
no
right.
downside. Yeah. So violating federal law, violating the Freedom of Information Act, withholding information illegal, no downside to it. Nothing happens to you. Other than the
Wow.
fact that you're encouraged to do that. And they probably give you a raise for, fighting Lloyd Chapman, right?
Hmm.
But I've got a check coming in the mail right now from the SBA for 216 or $17,000, I think. They used to send me a check. Then I would blow the checks up and frame them and mount them on my wall. I've got a bunch of them, and I would do a press release and have a picture of the check. So they started wanting to just deposit to my bank account, so I wouldn't have a check I could show on the on the internet, right? They asked my lawyer, what my bank account number and what my some other number was,
Right.
and I said no, I want a check. I want to pay, have them mail a check to your office. That's what I want. I bet they fight that. We'll see. I bet the
Wow.
SBA fights. They're going to come up with some bullshit reason why they can't send me a check, right?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
they don't want me to blow it up and show it on, But whatever they do, I will. That shows that they had to give me $216,000. I will make a copy of it and put out a press release, right?
Good.
But
Very good.
yeah, it's sad. It's this week has been shocking to me. I mean, I've just been shocked. I talked to a lot of people on X, and I probably connect with about 100 people a day and read what they say. And it just is really shocking to think that our government is against the companies where 99.9% of all the businesses are and where most people work. So most Americans work in a small business. And it's just sort of mind-boggling to me to think that the Republicans have wanted to kill all programs for the small businesses where most Americans work,
Hmm.
where most Republicans work. Most Republicans either own or work in a small business, right? And it's just, I just can't. Why? To what end?
Well,
To what end? But I think one of the reasons that we're 36 trillion in debt, one of the reasons is they're suppressing the job creators and the taxpayers, right? So small businesses, every one of them pays taxes. There's not one small business probably that makes zero taxes, and yet 34% of big businesses don't pay taxes.
hmm.
But think about a government and a Congress and people from all 50 states that go, yeah, let's pass a law that some of the biggest companies don't have to pay taxes, and let's try to kill the programs for the small businesses that do pay the taxes, and then let's give away
Yeah.
hundreds of billions to foreign countries.
Yeah,
It's just
that alone qualifies Congress and Washington, D.C. as a swamp. It really does.
I just don't get it. I guess if you're in Congress and you're not corrupt and a criminal and trying to bankrupt the economy, you can't be reelected because your party won't support you in the next primary. So if you're not a crook and a criminal, they'll replace you with somebody that is next time. That's how
Yeah,
the whole thing operates, right?
they might not be initiatory in their criminality. They might just be rubber stamps because they want to get reelected. So they just go along. They go
Yeah,
along. They'll sign
there's
whatever
been a.
comes down the pike. Yeah.
My father told me when I was a child. I remember we were standing in my driveway in Houston, Texas, about 1959, and he said, "No one leaves Congress without being a multimillionaire."
And that's
Right?
about 10 years after President Truman said, "You show me a politician who got rich in politics, and I'll show you a crook,"
Absolutely,
which is the same point.
absolutely.
Same point.
I like Bernie Sanders for that fact. I don't, I saw Bernie Sanders' net worth one day, and it's nothing, right? So, yeah, I
Recently?
like Bernie
Okay,
Sanders,
good.
but our government is corrupt. It's like the mafia runs the government, right?
Well, you've been fighting it for 35 years, Lloyd, and it speaks to your goodness that today you could still say that you're blown away, you're boggled by it. It's because that's how unacceptable it is to you after work fighting it and knowing about it for decades. Good for you. Good for you. That speaks well about your
Yeah.
moral character, etc. Good for you.
Well, I've been canceled.
Yeah.
I've been shut down
Yeah.
completely. You can't contact me. You can't call me. You can't email me. I call it the Iron Dome.
Right. Well,
Uh,
folks, you give your number to and your email to can contact you. You're saying, by and large, that when you set those up professionally on behalf of the ASBL.com, et cetera, someone's interfering with them, and you're not getting your communication basically turned off about 2012, 2013, right?
2013. Again, I don't want to tell the same story every episode, but I hired the Minch Group in New York City to investigate my communications. The Minch Group is an international, huge international company, right? And they came back and said, we've discovered that a large international firm has compromised all your communications, right? So my office phone hasn't rung, quite frankly, in 11 years. So it went from ringing 100 times a day. Members of Congress wanted me to endorse their bill,
Yep.
small business owners with problems, people from the media. I used to do interviews. Gosh, when Obama was running for president, I did interviews from 4:30 in the morning till like 3 o'clock in the afternoon, just
Hmm.
straight through.
Hmm.
Again, they've shut that down. And and I can't find out. I've hired people to look into it. They say it's happening so far down the line you'll never find it.
All
But
right.
I'm going to start a renewed effort to find that. I'm going to sue my phone provider and see if they can find it. Right?
Well, talk
I've got
about
a
that
new
renewed
law.
effort. Talk about that.
Well, I've got a new law firm, and I think they're going to help me find out why is my phone not ringing.
Right.
Right? Why am I not getting emails? Right?
Right.
Um, for a while there, I was so busy with other things, I didn't really, worry about it. I'm going to jump into it again with a couple of my new attorneys and see if I can't find it. I'm going to look into why the fact that when you put out a press release, the basic press release is about $1,100. Then you can add groups,
Hmm.
and the more groups you add, the more it costs, right?
Hmm.
The press release I put out yesterday on Elon Musk, I told my PR firm maximum distribution, include every group that you can, and nobody picked it up. But that's just impossible, right? So I'm gonna look into other press releases that Business Wire released yesterday and see what their pickup was. And
Right.
I think I could prove in court that my press release was not released and that Business Wire might be guilty of breach of contract. So
Do
I've got
it.
to call my attorney this afternoon and talk about that.
You're a big supporter, as am I, of Bobby Kennedy. Thrilled that he's got the health lane in the new administration. What do you make about the fact that a couple days ago on his YouTube channel, his personal YouTube channel, he posted the video of his interview of you that was done, Lloyd, earlier this year, or was it done in
March,
2023? It was done in
March.
March. The audio's been out all over the internet. We've mentioned it before, but just about 3, 4 days ago, boom, he puts it on. What significance do you see in that, if any?
I think he's trying to help me. I've got his phone number, and just last night I sent him a link to the open letter I sent to Elon Musk. Right, but I think Kenny's trying to help me. But he's just. Can you imagine how busy he is? I mean, every second of his day, right?
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
he's
What
trying
he's
to. He's
juggling. Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
but he's getting ready to take over the largest agency of government. So in that press release, by the way, people can find it. Go on the internet and search on an open letter to Elon Musk from American Small Business League President Lloyd Chapman and read it.
Yep.
And I'm asking Musk to adopt Bobby's economic stimulus program. The ideas he and I talked about on that podcast were included in his small business, big middle class economic stimulus program.
Back when he was a candidate before
Yeah.
August.
When we did that show, by the way, he looked like he was going to be elected president. At that time, on the day that we did that show, 86% of Americans thought Biden was too old to be reelected, and about 70% didn't want Trump or Biden.
And if he didn't post the video specifically to help you, it may have been a signal to you that I haven't forgotten well how much help small businesses need. That's an interesting way of looking at it too. And you
Yeah,
said he's about to take over the largest department in the government, Health and Human Services. Is that the largest?
yeah, I did not know that. I always thought it was the Pentagon. I was stunned when
I
I
would
did a
have bet
Wikipedia
it's the
search.
Pentagon. My gosh, I've
It's
got some
it's it's
homework to
twice the
do.
size of the Pentagon. The Pentagon budget is very deceiving. They say it's only 800
Million.
billion. It's over a
Right.
trillion, right? Because they call it different things, right, to make it look smaller. In reality, the Pentagon spends, I would say, probably twice what their advertised
I
budget
said
is.
million. I think it's billion, right? It's probably 800. They say 800 billion, but it's over a trillion, you're saying.
I read an article in a magazine 15 years ago that said the Pentagon spends 1.2 trillion. That was 15 years ago.
Right. Okay. Okay. But the Health and
Yeah,
Human Services is what?
it's about 1.6 trillion.
How about that?
And I think they have like 83,000 employees. I don't know how many employees the Pentagon has. Yeah, so he's getting ready to take over the largest agency. I'm kind of pinning my hopes on my friend Tiffany's fiance. Tiffany is wonderful. She's smart. She's amazing. She's charismatic. She's brilliant. And I think she might have some role where she can help promote small businesses, right?
Hmm.
But I'm going to be 75 next week. I need to hang this up, right?
Lloyd, you're going to
But
be 75 tomorrow, the 14th.
I'll now get all these birthday presents delivered to my house. Thank
Yes,
you
you
for saying
will.
that, right? Yeah. New cars will show up.
Well, I want
But
some of them because it happens to be my birthday too. But go ahead.
that's right. That's right. I forgot about that. My original plan was to have you come out here and celebrate our birthdays together. But you know what happened with that, right? But
If you don't mind, I want to share what I brought to the table.
go ahead.
This recent post on a Substack, lionessofjudah.substack.com. Headline, Edward Dowd issues red alert as excess deaths still skyrocketing in COVID vaccinated children. She's put here an article by Frank Berman. A world renowned data expert has just issued a red alert after uncovering evidence that reveals excess deaths are continuing to skyrocket in children who received COVID mRNA, quote, vaccines. According to Wall Street data analyst Ed Dowd, find him, follow him. He is a former executive at the world's largest investment firm, BlackRock. He's considered one of America's leading data experts. And through his expert analysis of insurance industry data, he has become a prominent figure in investigations into the impact of the global COVID vaccination campaign. On the Jimmy Dore Show, Dowd produced shocking data showing that excess child deaths are still surging higher, long after the COVID mRNA vaccines were first released. He made the discovery while analyzing the official data from the UK government's Office for National Statistics, ONS. The trend is most likely reflected in other nations with a similar mass vaccination protocol, including the US, Canada, Australia, and much of Europe. Dowd's data shows that excess deaths for children aged 1 to 14 have surged higher each year since the COVID mRNA, quote, vaccines were rolled out in 2021. According to Dowd, excess deaths for children in this age group spiked by a staggering 22% in 2023, the last full year of data. Dowd revealed that up to 15 million people have now been killed by the injections globally. So people can read more about this, like I said, at lionessofjudah.substack, an article dated December 13th. Let me share another thing about the shots, Lloyd. At childrenshealthdefense.org on December 10th, headline, Did COVID vaccines cost more lives than they saved? The public deserves a rigorous, truthful evaluation. And this is an article from the Brownstone Institute. It's rather complex, and yet it's worth everybody reading because the point will be made of the question in the headline. And you will also see that Children's Health Defense sources meticulously with doctors, scientists, and researchers every claim, not only that goes on the website, but that also goes out in their books. And it'll be no surprise to many to learn that this organization was created about 10 years ago by Bobby Kennedy Jr., Children's Health Defense.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I knew that.
.org. And I'm going to hold up a book that they distributed. They didn't really publish it. And it's called Turtles All the Way Down, Vaccine, Science, and Myth. And I have to hold this carefully so it doesn't white out. Turtles All the Way Down, Vaccine, Science, and Myth. And one of the huge points of this book, Lloyd, is that there are no safety data, no trials, no tests, no science, no data that can show that any vaccine has ever been proven to be safe and effective.
Yep.
And here's another book called Dissolving Illusions, Disease, Vaccines, and the Forgotten History. And the major illusions this book dissolves is the idea that modern science and vaccines eradicated infectious diseases. No, What this book shows and proves is that while improvements in sanitation, basically, and nutrition were lowering disease incidence, the pharmaceutical industry was blossoming and introducing vaccines and was able to claim the efficacy for themselves. And what are your thoughts about that before I talk about the Middle East and Israel and Syria?
It's typical. It's typical. The American people were being abused in every conceivable way. There's no way you could
Mm.
abuse us that we're not being abused, right? I saw Musk say something the other day that it was amazing. He said, they tax you on what you make, they tax you on what you buy, they tax you on what you own, and then when you die, they tax you.
Yeah.
But that's amazing. And then they take that money and they're squandering it. They're giving it to foreign countries. It's just mind-boggling.
Your description of taxes reminds me of a lot of information, frankly, that's in my book, God School 9/11 and JFK, that frankly, everybody needs to learn the miraculous thing that America was set up to be back in the late 1700s. And when you read the writings of the founders in the Federalist Papers and in their memoirs or in their things that they sent to newspapers, this is all well described that we've got a chance to be a government of the people, to be a government that lets the people govern themselves as long as there's virtue in the society and representatives are held to account with honesty and transparency. But if not, if we let the wealthy take over our government like they always do, people like Jefferson forewarned that eventually, if we go into debt, the people will be taxed, like you just quoted Elon Musk, on this, and this, until they will spend 16 hours of the 24 working to pay taxes on that debt and have no time for sanity, intelligence, research, or to marshal the
Yep.
strength to hold
Yep.
their representatives to account and be virtual slaves eating oatmeal just like their cousins in Britain. And here we are, 250 years later. Unfortunately, like every other time in history, it has happened. And we have to hope that if enough and when enough Americans know these things, Lloyd, and take action every day, every week, every month of their lives, that's where the small possibility is that we could turn things around in defiance of all history. And that's why all eyes are on the new Trump administration and what influence Bobby might have, because you and I know Bobby knows all this. And if he's got Trump's ear outside of just the medical and the health, it's going to be fascinating to see how much of the surveillance and the deep state and the debt Trump might try to turn around at the risk of being assassinated, because the last president who really tried to do this and be good along these lines was John F. Kennedy, whacked in 1963 in a coup d'etat by these awful elements that control
Yeah.
our government.
I think we're heading for a complete collapse. I really do.
We
I
have
mean,
to pray.
how can we not suffer a complete economic collapse when we're 36 trillion in debt? It goes up another trillion every 90 days. They're continuing to spend money, more money than we're breaking in, and they're trying to shut down the companies, the small businesses that pay the taxes. It looks like they're trying to collapse the economy.
Oh, many people are convinced we're seeing an intentional controlled demolition of the United States of
You know
America for the
what?
last 50, 40 years.
I believe in the last 10 to 15 years that they're trying to do that. Because if you collapse the economy, then you can buy everything for pennies on the dollar. I believe they collapsed the economy in 2008 on purpose. I think that's been well documented, right? That's been well documented. They did it on purpose.
The big money that runs America, it's not American based. It's not just American. It's leveraging, it's trying to use the United States for all it's worth, like they use every other government that they can for what they're worth, to consolidate wealth, consolidate power as they compete with each other. There are factions and we see them fighting each other sometimes, but they blame it on, street terrorists or etc. Along those lines, let me read the next couple things I queued up,
Go
Lloyd.
ahead.
This is from trendsinthenews.substack, trendsinthenews.substack, which is the Substack of Gerald Celente and his Trends Journal, which is a forecasting group for years and years and years. December 12th, title, headline, Netanyahu looks to next target, Iran. Israeli prime minister is on a winning streak, and he has Miriam Adelson's Donald Trump in the batter's box. Netanyahu addressed the people of Iran again and promised them that they would soon be free, and he has no doubt that they will realize that future together. Netanyahu, the man responsible for the genocide in Gaza, has been on a winning streak because of the complete support from the Biden administration during his attacks on Lebanon, Syria, the West Bank, and Gaza. Iran would be his grand prize. Gerald Celente in the Trends Journal holding America's feet to the fire for its support of Israel's barbaric, evil, criminal, genocidal destruction of the Palestinian people and the insanity of all that's being done to escalate and risk wider war out there where Israel, if it causes Turkey to join Russia, Lebanon, Syria, and Iran against Israel, all those forces have far greater conventional forces and armies than Israel. Israel will be backed into a corner where nuclear options would be the only way that Israel could defend itself. And that is where we are stumbling forward. And that's how urgent it is to read these people who analyze it at a great depth. Lloyd, what do you think of that?
The International Criminal Court has charged him with war crimes. And I believe every major country on earth considers what's happening in Gaza genocide.
Except the U.S.
Yeah, and
And
we're
maybe, and
funding it.
maybe New Zealand or Australia or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it just boggles the mind to be someone who grew up in the 50s that at this stage of my life, America is funding genocide and war crimes.
And
And if you don't like it, they're going to try to say you're anti-Semitic, right?
yeah,
What bullshit,
and
you know?
also after the greatness of President Kennedy walking us back from the Cuban Missile Crisis, and then the next year in the last year of his life, so eloquently leading us to appreciate and work for peace and disarmament, to be at this age and at this year so close to nuclear holocaust, Lloyd, it's breathtaking. But that's how corrupt America is and many of the governments of the West. And we have to be ready for anything. And we have to go forward with hope anyway, because young people need to be inspired. And we all need to think of the future generations that deserve us working to make this a world worth being born into.
The world is not heading in a good direction, and America's not heading in a good direction. If I were the president, I could solve all these problems my first day in office. We need to pull all of our troops back from all foreign countries. No more troops, no more bases on foreign countries. We need to take all that money and focus on America. I saw they gave Ukraine 176 billion. I'm sure they gave Israel an equal amount, right?
Hmm.
Let's just say that's around 100 or 300 billion, right? Can you imagine what we'd do if we spent 300 billion in America? That would cure cancer and heart disease and Parkinson's. Every kid could have a free education. There'd be no homeless, right? All the roads that looked like they were new. They could probably cut our taxes in half, and everyone in the country would have a better quality of life.
The
It's
people would
just
have to take the government back from the corporate and banking interests that use America, and
you,
that's the issue. That's the
yeah.
huge challenge. We'll take every man-made effort and every divine intervention. We're at a great length for a great show here,
All right,
Lloyd. What would you leave us with? What are your final
all right.
thoughts for today?
Follow me on X. Check out my video with Bobby Kennedy. It's RFK Jr. Lloyd Chapman. You can find it. And find my press releases, an open letter from Lloyd Chapman and Elon Musk. And the first 10 people that send me an email with your name and address, my new email is contactasbl@protonmail.com. So the first 10 people who send me your address, I will send you a free copy of Bruce's book. I'm doing this to test that the government has compromised my new email. So
Okay.
next time we do a show, we'll see what happens. So my email is contactasbl@protonmail.com, and I will send you a free copy of Bruce's book.
Thank you,
And
Lloyd. That is
I'll put
most
a hundred
generous.
dollar bill in two of them. How about that? I'll put a $100 bill in two of them. I won't look at it. I'll just send them out, and maybe you'll get the book with a $100 bill. There'll be two of them with $100 bill in. All
Wow.
right, Bruce.
Well, I want to thank you for that. And anyone who gets my book by Lloyd like that, tell me that you got it, whether you had the $100 or not. And write me at bruce@brucetetoris.com. Great show. Great seeing you again, Lloyd. I want to thank you, and I want to thank everybody for being with us today.